Welcome to Season 3 of the Strange, Rare, and Peculiar podcast, a place where we explore the past, present, and future of homeopathy from the perspective of a couple of insiders who have been around the homeo block a couple of times.
Homeo block? Good afternoon, good evening, welcome, hello, and
Cheers. Salud.
Cup of tea.
So, we have what I think is a really fun topic. So, yesterday, when we were in our rolling team meetings, Sherry, who...
Called our huddle.
Our huddle. We were in our huddle. And Sherry, who makes everything beautiful and communicates to the world on our behalf... She said, there's a lot of chatter on the socials about why should I have a homeopath?
Why should I have a homeopath?
And I think...
Because you've got a pulse?
Well, because, I mean, excuse me, there are a million ways that you could answer that question. Yep. There's the obvious reason, well, you should, because it is an amazing form of healthcare. But then there are the other questions around DIY homeopathy, how much can and should a person do on their own. But then there are other nuanced aspects of the conversation that I thought would be fun for us to have, like the history of DIY homeopathy.
Oh.
And I pulled out a stack of books from the library around that. But also, why in 2025 are people feeling like why the increase in demand in homeopathy, number one, and number two, why are people perhaps sometimes ecstatic about the care they get from a homeopath, but also why are some people saying, I've seen some homeopaths and I haven't gotten good results, and thinking, let me take matters into my own hands?
Well, it's the times that we're living in.
Well, I think it's a lot of things.
Well, it is a lot of things. But yeah, the times that we're living in the sense that we... the quality of delivery is uneven
of homeopathy.
Yeah, but there is a whole lot of information available to the fingertips.
This is the thing,
which has made all healthcare delivery
exactly
complex, because it means that by the time you go and have your bowel surgery, you'll probably know as much, if not more, than your specialist, with access to what looks like information, and to the untrained eye, all information is equal.
Right. Unless
it's curated, or unless you get to understand the nuances of it when you realize all information is not equal.
This is the thing.
So we're living in the times of, it's known as the democratization of information.
Right.
Or the Googleization of it.
The Googleization. I love that. I've never heard that.
You can have that today.
Anyway, so one of the things that we were thinking about and talking about was kind of in 2025, the demand for homeopathy is greater than it's ever been. And I think that it's probably important for us to talk about why that demand has increased so much. And I think part of it is that people are looking for solutions to complex health problems for which the medical system is challenged to deal with. So a couple of things come to mind.
Yeah, a couple of things come to my mind too. Homeopathy has got all of the qualities that are, if you like, lined up correctly for exactly what you just said. It lends itself to telehealth.
Totally.
It lends itself to DIY. It lends itself through the storage of the medications and the searching for answers to a larger proportion of folks that would do homeopathy doing it DIY as opposed to acupuncture. I mean, imagine trying to acupuncture yourself or your squirming baby.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when it comes to alternative medicine and the modalities that people might be looking at, homeopathy becomes a natural solution because availability and accessibility of the medicines, the non-toxic nature. It's green medicine. It's relatively inexpensive. It's actually really inexpensive. Remedies are shelf stable. They basically last forever, right? You can have a kit. Like when I worked in the outreach clinic in New York, I still have it, a box. What is it? 144 remedies. And it's a box I made myself. And it's just little, it's a 12 by 12 plastic case that fits a half-dram vial beautifully.
It's a bullet case.
It's a bullet case. And I just, because of the clientele that I was treating, I sort of knew what I needed to take. And I made a box of 144 remedies that got me through. And I could take it in my backpack, and then I could dispense, to these folks who, were coming for free care at an outreach clinic, and send them off with it. And it was, that's amazing. You don't get that with a lot of things. And I think, so that makes homeopathy appealing, right? And anybody can and should learn how to use a basic, handful of remedies for first aid and, basic acute stuff.
Yeah, you just changed direction though, because we were talking about why the features of homeopathy lend themselves to these times.
Right.
And then what you just said was, and homeopathy is brilliant at a bunch of immediate first aid domestic challenges.
But let's stay in that first part for a minute. So,
yeah, I agree.
Okay, so with that, we've got, one of the things I talk about when I'm lecturing on autoimmune conditions is, in the setup, I will point out the fact that the medical system, as it has evolved over, 100 and however many years since medicine moved from, the bedside to the consultation room, right? When hospitals became, more accessible, because it used to be, fever hospitals. They were places to avoid contagion, right? And then it became a place that you would go for, accidents and emergencies, right? And A&E didn't exist until, I don't know, the 60s?
70s, yeah.
70s? There were no ambulances until, there were basically just people, driving people to get to a facility for care. Yeah. And so it's a relatively new phenomenon to have sort of urgent care facilities everywhere. The medicine has become this sort of institutionalized thing. And over time, what has happened, well, let me stick with one thing here, because if you're just talking about like the complexity of chronic issues, right? Because I think having acute and emergent care is key, and I hope it only gets better over time and nothing gets taken away, right? If you need a surgery, if you need, to be patched up, if there's an emergency, like you need the people who are going to do that. But then there's like the slow simmering chronic things for which the medical system is I think challenged, because as I was saying about autoimmunity, so if somebody has an autoimmune diagnosis, they are likely to have another, right? The evidence shows that people, it's 75% women, and if you have one autoimmune diagnosis, you are, I forget the statistic, but like it's something like 50% more likely to have two or more. And that makes sense if you're a homeopath, because it's all the overlapping symptoms that are features of different things. But here's the thing that confounds the medical system is that it is in multiple organ systems. Yeah. And the medical system is set up for treating the dead part. It's a necrology as opposed to, right? So it's built on the thing that's broken. But if you have 4 broken bits, and you're seeing, so you're seeing a rheumatologist, you're seeing, you're seeing a nephrologist, you're seeing a dermatologist, you are getting care for the specific lane that they're focused on. But that care, but the condition, the root of the condition spans multiple disciplines.
Yeah, and so if you've spent 7 years training how to be a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. Right. You do your best, and they do.
And they do.
But in multi-systemic chronic challenges, you don't want a hammer.
And this is, and
or
so...
that hammer.
Exactly, because then what happens is you might have multiple medications that are interacting with one another. Mm-hmm. Or when something is that kind of a challenge, then what are we doing in the medical model? Mostly, steroids and, immunosuppressants, because you've got to get the person out of that highly inflammatory state, reduce the pain, blah, blah, blah. And so I think that, that's part of why people are looking for, or they're looking for a solution
They're looking for solutions. There's no doubt about it.
Right.
And I think the next part of it, because I like the way that you kind of went all historical there for a minute, talking about the evolution of bedside medicine to emergency medicine. The other part of it is there's a long and noble history, going back 40,000 years, of ownership of one's health, which has been lost in the last 40 years.
Totally.
So 40,000 years versus the last 40. What's happened? In the last 40 years, you've got the evolution of evidence-based medicine. So that's on the back of Sackett, his name was.
Yeah.
And evidence-based medicine started off really beautifully. Basically, best practice.
Well, that's what homeopathy is based on.
Well, but in combination with the latest clinical evidence.
Exactly.
And given the cultural perspective of the user of the medicine. That's how...
Wait, talk about that last part. The cultural perspective of the user. Say more, sir.
Well, say more, meaning that that's how evidence... But that's what Sackett said. That's what evidence... By definition, evidence-based medicine started as in the 70s, in the 60s and 70s. Looking good. And... it's just Denise doing a little hand wiggle.
I had a too tight ponytail and needed to... My brain was expanding from all the information.
And so, well, let me give you some more. And so then it very quickly became, let's strip away the cultural perspective of the user, because that's complicated when it comes to traditional and indigenous cultures in a system of healthcare. And then strip away... what's the term that's most used? Not best practice, but expert opinion. And the stripping away of expert opinion, if you're taking away the expert opinion of the person who's been the village physician for 45 years, is a disaster. But if you're stripping away, we've always done it like this, and that's what I was taught at med school, therefore that's what we're going to do.
Right.
Then that makes a whole lot of sense. And so now evidence-based medicine at its worst is driven by insurance salesmen and lawyers and hospital accountants
and pharmaceutical
lobbyists. And so evidence-based medicine as it's now is definitely not how it started. So that's an important thing to say. And then, of course, this is at the end of a noble tradition of giving agency back to the users of medicine.
Yeah.
And that goes, in the Western tradition, that goes straight to Culpeper, who's a hero of mine, who was, of course, around in the English Civil War, early 1600s. And you know all about Culpeper, right?
What's the story about his wife?
The love of his life.
Yeah.
The night that they were to elope.
Yeah.
And run away to get married.
Yeah.
As a heady 18-year-old or 19-year-old, she was struck by lightning and killed. Struck by lightning.
I mean...
How often does that happen? Anyway.
I had a client who got struck by lightning. I told you that. Really? Well, actually, so one of my clients was at a music festival, and her friend was performing and got struck by lightning on stage. It was in Canada. I don't know. I have to be careful because I don't want to... Anyway, so I got a phone call. This was maybe, I don't know. You gave phosphorus? 12 years. I did. I gave some phosphorus.
There you go. It's funny. Anyway, I don't need.
But that's funny. I haven't really thought. I treated a lightning strike once.
Culpeper is grieving. Goes to medical school at Cambridge. I think it's Cambridge, because he's got a bit of money. His dad had left money. His dad died early. And he is moping around learning medicine, but also realizing that he's in shifting times because of the invention of the printing press. Just in the same way that in 1995, everyone realized, oh, I can now publish my book. Desktop publishing.
Oh, and then the internet.
Right. Culpeper wrote his great book, the name of which escapes me right now. Something physic. The point being that he wrote it in plain English.
Yeah.
And he was able to translate the Latin to bring decision making and healthcare to the common folk.
Right.
Now, I have to say that that's always really, really strongly appealed to me. So any movement or any medicine that deliberately does that. It also ties in, because when I said 40,000 years, I wasn't wrong, because Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, there's these 400 different nations that are mobile and nomadic and moving. And one of the things about them, one of the things about Paleolithic cultures and, if you like, Stone Age cultures, traditional cultures, in most places around the world, the thing is that they all know the indications for herbal medicines. Mm-hmm. If you get stung by something, they all know what to do.
Sure.
It's your responsibility to know. Mm-hmm. And that is taught from mother to daughter to son to, intergenerational oral tradition. Everyone knows how to do stuff. And then, for big problems like fights between people, disputes between couples, then you get in the big guns. Then you get the community involved. Mm-hmm. And for anything which is chronic, that's when you need the shaman.
The shaman.
And the shaman, through the use of smoke, dance, trance, meditation, getting the whole community involved. The whole community being...
And convalescence.
50 people.
And people taking care.
Yeah.
Letting a person convalesce.
That's when you need the expert medical specialist.
Yeah.
So that's the shaman.
Yeah.
And so I've always I was surprised by that and love it. And then you get into the 18th century, which is, of course, the time where medicine that you're talking about is going from the bedside to the laboratory.
Yep. Well, that's really that's mid-19th century. Mid-19th, not 18th.
Well, then you got...
Because mid-19th century was when sort of the bioreductionistic medicine starts to happen, and that's when, you've got laboratory results. So it moves from natural state of being to what's normal. My labs are. Yeah. Right? Which is how you get from a consultation where the physician is asking all about how you're doing and understanding, what you're eating, how you're feeling, are you chilly, all this thing, because medicine at that point was about how a person is in harmony with nature. And then it shifts over to how a person's labs are in range. And so that's how you get from a consultation that takes, however long to 7 minutes, right? Because all you need to do is, you get somebody to come and do the basic, physical, sorry about that. That's the dog coming by. You've got somebody who comes by and is, the nurse, the assistant of some sort comes in and they're taking your, the vitals, and then the doctor comes in and asks a couple of questions, and then you have your visit to the laboratory. Laboratory. How do you say it? Laboratory.
I say the laboratory.
Mm-hmm. I like how you say it.
The lobotomy.
Yeah.
But why I said the mid-1800s was because we can't forget about Samuel Thompson.
Right.
Because in terms of a bullet point in the history of medicine, he's very definitely left out deliberately because he was extremely unfashionable. Wrote an amazing book called Every Man His Own Physician. Mm-hmm. Essentially in the same lineage as Culpeper, and his homeopathic mate in Philadelphia, Constantine, your ex-boyfriend.
Ex-boyfriend.
Your complicated ex-boyfriend.
He's complicated.
And so...
That hair and those glasses, such a...
Do you think... So, so far, the journey I've just described leaves me with, no, I don't think every person is their own physician. But actually, I do think that everybody has a duty to take care of domestic indispositions and acute problems.
This is the thing.
And for me, that is non-negotiable.
And so...
So there.
I'd like... Give me 5. Give me 5. High 5.
All right.
So this is... So we've sort of set the stage for this idea that DIY medicine, like homeopathy as a DIY, it's not unique, and... It kind of lends itself because of the accessibility and availability of the intervention of the medicines.
Well, think about the other things in life that we do, DIY.
IKEA furniture.
Well, what are you sitting on?
I know. I'm sitting on
Alastair Gray's
retrofitted
IKEA excellence.
Whatever these were TV stands. We put a whole bunch of them in a row to make a bench in the dining room with a cabinet.
A bench. It's a banquette. I'll have you know.
That is correct. It is a banquette.
And that was the labour of about 2 weeks' work.
Yeah.
2 weeks evenings.
For you, and then of course we had to have the man come.
Well, then we had the man come to fix it. To make it stable.
And then Judy come to paint it.
Well, remember, I was going to have it about 3 inches higher, and it was made, and I was going to have it with, it was going to look very different. We'll just leave it at that.
Let's leave it at that, because DIY, so actually, this is a great metaphor, because DIY is good until it isn't. So this DIY bench that we're on, or this banquette, it was great until... Is it
going anywhere?
It's not going anywhere. However, we had to call in an expert.
Got it.
Because and you were able to make a couple janky moves to kind of make it work. So we had a measurement problem. That was I did that wrong. So I measured wall to wall. I didn't measure from the mold, the baseboard molding. And so we had...
Catastrophe because of that. We were an inch and a half.
An inch and a half off.
Yeah.
And that inch and a half went from being perfect to being you had to cut an inch and a half out of a piece of IKEA furniture that has drawers in it. Oh, this is actually turning out to be a great metaphor.
It is a great metaphor.
And so you actually did kind of a good job because you made it fit. However, you try to open that drawer.
I know how to open that drawer.
Yeah. But you
do it right now.
Yeah. You need 2 hands to lift it and put it in, but it doesn't really work right. And then we had to call in an expert, and he had to come and he had to shore the thing up, get it onto the wall, make sure that it wasn't going to fall over. So we kind of...
And what we're talking about here, folks, is a chronic disease because, of course, the floor was not even
level. Our house is built in 1850.
Yeah, our house has got a whole lot of miasmatic features.
It sure, and a ghost or
two. And a ghost that was laughing the whole time. Although he or she has not been around for a little while. Thank you.
Well, let's see. We have the light on. Let's see if they come and show themselves. But this is so. There was so much.
In this instance, DIY was had we.
So we tried to do... Actually, this is great. Hold on, one more feature. Because the reason that we decided to DIY it is we got an estimate.
And the estimate was $25,000.
It was...
Millions.
It was $14,000. $14,000.
Which we did not have.
No, and nor were we going to invest in this sort of folly. It wasn't necessary, but it's great.
And so we've got a choice to spend $14,000 we don't have to... do it proper and looking spectacular.
Or we could DIY it.
Or we DIY it and then we do it for $1,500.
And then we only got so
down.
Far. Yeah, and then we had to hire someone who came and kind of fixed it, but it'll never be perfect.
Because with good humor. With good humor.
It was fine. It was totally fine. But this is what we see happening in homeopathy.
Well, we see it happening in dentistry. Okay,
so I'm obsessed with this guy. We both got in our news feeds the guy who... What was he? He wasn't in America. Where was he?
No idea.
There was a guy, somebody will know, who, it turns out, did not go to dental school. But he watched a bunch of videos on YouTube and managed to have himself a dentistry practice. And he was doing root canals.
For how long?
A while.
That's straight up illegal.
He had done hundreds, if not thousands of procedures because he just including and I don't know how he got busted, but think about the investment. He had the chair, right? That's not a cheap chair. I don't think he was just doing it at home in a recliner, right? He had a proper dental office. Maybe he bought a practice. Who knows how? But he got himself a dental practice watching YouTube videos.
Wow.
Right.
That's something.
Which I think I love, that kind of thing. For example, I wanted to learn how to do lymphatic drainage. I'm not going to buy a trampoline. And I thought, well, I want to make sure that my lymphatics are draining. Actually, do you know how I came to think about that? Because I had a client the last week who had an issue that is clearly a chronic issue, but he sent me a picture of what had happened. It looked like he thought he got a spider bite, and it was like this circular thing on his abdomen with a line going up. And I'm like, that's not. And he had gone, it was the second time that it happened. He had gone, to the urgent care twice. The first time he had this thing look like a bug bite. They treated it as if it was Lyme disease. It was, I don't think that that's what it was. It didn't look like it from the pictures that he showed. But because we see this all the time, I thought, oh my gosh, he probably got a course of doxycycline. Yes, that's what happened. And then guess what happened? It came back again. And so I looked at this picture and I thought, that's weird. That's not, and he said, oh, I'm really worried about getting sepsis. And I'm like, that's not in the circulatory system. That's lymph. So then, and interestingly, he had figured it out because he fed it into ChatGPT. And it said, and it explained what it was. And I think it was correct. And anyway, he got a homeopathic remedy and it's resolved. And I said, and that was something that...
Just relate the whole thing, though, to DIY. I don't get where you're going.
Oh, I'm going back to the fact that I wanted to learn to do lymphatic drainage, because then I went down a rabbit hole because I was researching, because it's really easy now to find this information.
But the lymphatic drainage massage practitioners that have spent hundreds and thousands of dollars on their training and are licensed are all yelling at the television right now.
No, I'm not going around that, because I think I refer to that all the time. Someone has breast cancer and they have a mastectomy or a lumpectomy. I always say to them, you've got to go to a massage practitioner to get lymphatic drainage. I think everyone should be involved with that. And I get body work done regularly, and she works on my lymphatics. But I thought, as a part of my regular self-care routine, like a dry brushing thing, like the things you do for maintenance, I like some of the practices of, dry brushing, and, I have a daily yoga practice. There are things that I do. And I thought, I wonder if I have a little stagnation in my lymphatic system. Is there something I can do that's kind of a self-care practice that would just enhance my overall well-being? And, right? And I thought would be really good for my armpits. And so I did a little, so anywho. But that's really different than what you just said, which is, like, if a person has, if I've got a client that had come to me, let's pretend that we're still in the time when people come live into the office. If somebody presented to my office and she had, a lumpectomy and had some lymphedema and needed, there was no way, even if I had watched 50 videos, that's not my area of expertise.
Stay in the lane.
Right?
Guardrails.
And I don't know what I'm looking for. Like, if I'm doing a manual practice, I wouldn't know what it's supposed to feel like. It's like that's not what I do, right?
Although you're a generalist, and therefore
in the field of homeopathy.
And therefore you butt up against and are adjacent to all of these specialties.
Right. So making recommendations, maybe see a person who does this, that, or the other.
But you're not going to pull a tooth in your office, right?
It's highly unlikely.
Or, as you said before, get out the wrench and do some spleen surgery.
Not going to happen.
No. Why? Because you've got scope of practice boundaries.
Right. And I think when it comes to self-care, okay.
Boundaries.
So, but going back to, because this is, why should someone have a homeopath? We've got to this place where we kind of come up through history, and you can start to see that homeopathy, one of the things that has sort of opened the door is that historically there was encouragement for people.
Huge encouragement.
Huge encouragement. So the stack of books. Let me get my stack of books.
Huge encouragement for people to take responsibility for their own health and their own and the health of their kids in rural situations, regional situations, and frontier situations.
That's the thing, because during the time, so homeopathy, sorry for the sound, came around during the time of westward expansion, right? And
go west.
Oh, I love this. So I went into our library, and I grabbed a small sample of the books that we have that are on home care from the 19th century.
Nice. These folks, you might,
And
depending
so-
on your disposition, see as smelly old dusty books.
I love them.
But these are beautiful.
So we have the People's Common Sense Medical Advisor by Pierce. We've got Homeopathy Family Guide, Johnson. Homeopathic Domestic Medicine, Laurie and McClatchy. Homeopathic Domestic Physician, that's Pult. How do you say it?
Pulte.
You say Pulte. Pult. P-U-L-T-E.
Pulte.
Our Family Physician, Allopathic, Homeopathic, Hydropathic, Eclectic, and Herbal. And then Modern
Herbal.
Domestic Medicine, Hanchet. And then, of course, Herring's Domestic Physician.
And Herring is super clear in his introduction that this is not encouraging people to practice medicine outside of their skill set or scope. But this is a whole lot of common sense information about good living, about what to do when you step on a ground bee's nest, what to do when you get a ding in the eye.
What to do if you're, vomiting and diarrhea, or diarrhea and, edging into
Yeah.
Dehydration. Okay, so this one, I love this one. Our Family Physician, Allopathic, Homeopathic, Hydropathic, Eclectic, and Herbal. Oh my gosh. So this is great. One of the things I love about old books is, marginalia. And I know it drives you crazy that I am forever, all my books have sticky notes and comments in them.
It's not, doesn't drive me crazy. It's actually,
I know you think it's wrong.
it's like setting up a market in the temple.
Okay. Anyway, so this is this was revised in 1886. Okay, so this is from
A fine year.
90,000, it says. Our Family Physician, a plain, practical, and reliable guide to the detection and treatment of all the diseases common to this country, designed for use by people who have not made the practice of medicine a study or a business, and who are not supposed to be familiar with technical phrases and names, but want information stated in plain English.
Culpepper.
Gives separately with every disease the treatment prescribed by each of the, quote, schools, and full and explicit directions for nursing the sick, preparation of food for the sick, etc. So there's, what I love about this is the care. How do you support a person who is sick? Do you, just thinking about
Make them soup.
when I was sick. So one time in 2015, I think it was.
Right. No.
So we came home, we were teaching, and we came home from work, and I had some digestive
Which meant cycling
complaints.
through the thick of Brooklyn.
Right, because we used to ride our bikes to work. We would have ridden our bikes all the way home. And
Grand Army Plaza.
Yep.
On the side of the
Prospect Park. And so we get home, and I take to the bed, which is not my usual.
She undid her bodice.
I did, and I
lay on the chaise lounge and went,
and I put my hand to the back of my head, and so you said,
I'll step up.
I'll step up. I'm going to bring you some food. And what did you bring on that tray? I have a picture of that tray, my sick tray.
Well,
Do you recall?
I bought you what was in the fridge.
Well, you curated from the available foodstuffs.
Yeah, I did not. Well, what I did not bring you was some delicate chicken soup or broth.
Broth, right. There's no broth.
I bought you a very large stick of butter.
There was a stick of butter. There was pate.
And then there was the next thing I saw in the fridge that looked close to expiry date, so better use it. So that was pate.
Mm-hmm.
And
right, like a pork pate.
A couple of
goose liver and pork pate.
A couple of gherkins.
Yeah, some cornichons.
No, big jobs. You know, the...
Was it a big pickle? Like a full-size pickle?
Giant pickle.
Yeah.
And...
Probably some crackers.
A couple of crackers.
Probably a glass of wine. So, needless to say...
Why are you talking about my least finest moment?
Oh, no, that would not be your least finest moment. But I think that it just really does speak to the fact that learning how to take care of our sick and ailing bodies, we need reminders on occasion. Oh, yeah. Anyway, so here it says, I like this quote. And again, I'm still in Our Family Physician. It says, to know when to go after a doctor is an important thing. 9 times out of 10, calling one is a useless expense, while failing to call one at the proper time may cost a life! Exclamation point.
Right.
Right?
And then, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's important. And I think that it really does speak to the fact that when, like, we've got to really understand what we're doing. Like, when do you DIY and when don't you?
She's writing in the book.
I'm not writing in the book.
Oh.
I don't even have an instrument with me to write. But I love that it has, so here's an example.
Terrible behavior.
Oh my gosh, I opened to ringworm.
Take Basilone
So,
and call me in the morning.
ringworm, herpes circinatus. So that's what, if you're looking for the rubric, right? This disease is characterized by an eruption of little vesicles in the form of a ring, the center retaining its natural color, and it goes on and on. It gives general treatment. Attention should be paid to the diet, avoiding all stimulating articles of food. Keep the parts clean, and a tepid bath occasionally will be beneficial. It is well to open each vesicle with a needle. Oh, a little home surgery. And allow the contents to escape. This will often allay the itching. And allopathic. In severe cases, use some mild aspirant, such as sulfur and magnesium or sulfur and bitartrate of potassium. The smarting, itching, and burning may be relieved by a lotion of acetate of lead with a little alcohol or the use of acetate of lead ointment. The juice of the green rind of walnuts, tincture of galls, or a strong solution of acetate or sulfate of copper are applications recommended by Condi. Then it has the eclectic and herbal. The following ointment is recommended by Dr. John King. Bayberry, tallow, sweet gum, mutton suet.
Mutton suet?
Yeah, a half ounce of the bayberry tallow, a half ounce of sweet gum, and an ounce of mutton suet. Melt together and strain. The following is said to infallibly cure. Take tobacco leaves and boil them. Add vinegar and strong lye to the liquor. Wash the eruption several times a day. Castor oil frequently applied is said to be a certain cure. Balsam of Peru mixed with an equal quantity of tallow may sometimes cure. So you see that, like, this is giving people a whole sort of a menu of what you might do. Then there's homeopathic. I'm almost afraid to say, but it says sepia may be given in doses of 6 globules morning and evening. If at the end of the week this does not cure, give rustox and sulfur on alternate days. Oh boy. After having tried these remedies for 10 days or 2 weeks, there's still no improvement. Give calcarea and causticum on alternate. Oh boy, I don't even want to go on. And then it gives a whole bunch more. Then, okay. Wow.
So let's sum up where we are at. You've got in front of you
a beautiful
a pile
stack
of precedent saying to people, folks, if you're out there and you love homeopathy, then don't hold back. Use it.
And if you want some pork tallow and a little lye, use that. And if you want to...
Absolutely. But the days where Kent is saying, or whoever these physicians are saying, don't call us because we're very, very busy and we need our weekends, those days have gone because we have this device.
Well, but I think... But there's
it's called... telephone.
I know, but hold on.
Or it's called the internet.
We haven't gotten to the point. Though. Because I think that, and this has gone very long. We are many, many minutes into without the point. Because, look, here's the thing.
We'll get to the point.
Well, the point... acute care, everyone should be doing it at home. There's no question about it. All well, right. Acute... when we are sure that something is acute, sort of the domestic things.
Yeah.
And learning, not just always giving a remedy, but what do you do to support it? When do you use a warm compress? When do you restrict the diet and give only fluids for a bit? How long should a person convalesce? Like, there are ways that we need to really understand what to do in self-care. How do you manage a fever instead of, taking acetaminophen or whatever, right? Okay. But then, because I think there's another point that, I've got to do that Dale Carnegie course on how to win friends and influence people. But then there is the fact that all homeopathy care is not equal, and that people are not, because I think that part of the trend away from that new dirty word of classical homeopathy, which basically is just, there's homeopathy, right? A system of medicine established by Samuel Hahnemann, who figured out the philosophy and the medicines that go along with it, like it's a thing. And then you have to learn how to use it. And there is a way that you can be really effective for acute and chronic care with good homeopathy. But I think in the absence of the provision of good homeopathy care over the years, especially lack of knowledge of practitioners on how to deal with acute care, right? We kind of fell into this rut where...
Oh, so you're saying that part of the challenge or the problem that you've identified is that actually homeopaths have not been good at knowing how to deal with coughs and general acute stuff.
I think that was a prevalent... it was prevalent.
Right. Plus, domestic folks, or at least users of and consumers of homeopathy, have not always been that flash at understanding the difference between acute and chronic.
I mean, the same for homeopaths.
Right.
I mean, there was this time, I think there's still homeopaths out there who think that you can find this magic remedy that takes care of your acutes and your chronic stuff. It's like, no, there are two things. Hahnemann talks about it. There's acute disease, there's chronic disease, right? There is the dynamic disease, there is acute disease, and then there are indispositions and surgical disease. I mean, I'm leaving some things out like endemic disease, epidemic disease, whatever. But basically, you either have something that's acute, you got to get over it quickly, or it has potential to take you down. But then there are these deep chronic things that are, they don't. When a homeopath talks about something being chronic, it's a different definition than it is in the allopathic world, right? In the allopathic world, that the designation of something as chronic is because of the length of time a person has it. But in homeopathy, it's because this is the dynamic disturbance, the deeper disturbance. Some might call it the miasmatic disease that is expressing itself in a whole lot of different ways. The thing is, if you start to treat the chronic disease using the principles of acute prescribing, you can get yourself in trouble.
So I most recently came upon what you're talking about when I was leading the Standards and Competencies review back in 2022.
When you were still involved with ACHINA, the accrediting body for...
And I was talking to a bunch of folks that were equally involved and saying, is this the time that we clearly establish guardrails for these clearly different categories of healthcare?
People didn't want it, did they?
They were interested, but I think it got really hard. For me, it's not difficult. It's not difficult at all. If you've got a chronic disease in front of you, stop and leave it for the professional.
Totally.
You know, that would be a rule.
Yeah, but people have to understand.
Guardrail.
Yeah, but people have to understand, because if somebody said, "Oh, my kid has eczema, so I'm just buying some sulfur at Whole Foods or whatever, and I'm going to give it to them," that is an expression of a deeper. But see, when you say that, it makes it sound like somebody's really sick. It doesn't. It's a nomenclature issue within homeopathy. There are homeopathic remedies that are appropriate to use for things that are acute self-limiting conditions, but there are times, and Hahnemann discovered this in as early as 1816. So if we just put this into context of the evolution of homeopathy, he wrote the first Organon of Medicine, the first philosophy book, in 1810. And at that time, he was killing it. He's got epidemic things. He's dealing with scarlet fever, and he's like, all the things. And he's like, yeah, I figured it out. And he's, really pretty confident. As 1816, 6 years later, he said, uh-oh, there's a problem here.
Yeah.
And the problem is that there are true acute and self-limiting conditions, and then there are things that look acute that are actually related to a deeper sort of compromise of the overall health and vitality.
So in other words, because that acute disease sometimes is actually not acute disease but chronic disease, you're saying that that's the time for the user of homeopathy to put down the beautiful books,
right,
and the protocols and the permission, and say, actually, I'm going to call my homeo.
Yes, but here's the thing.
Huh.
Well, because if something
How would they know when to do that?
That's the challenge, and that is what I think it should be incumbent upon those in the profession to have the conversation.
Let's get our Americans for Homeopathy Choice to lay it out really clearly.
I think Paula does a really good job of communicating. Good. We're talking about Paula Brown, the president of Americans for Homeopathy Choice. I mean, I think, we've had so many conversations over the years. She recently had a birthday. Happy birthday, Paula. But she, Paula, because our school has looked at her curriculum, and she's got this beautiful homeschool curriculum about, it's a story of Evie Oh, we had, if you go back in the podcast, you can find the one we did with Paula. But she gets it because she was, using protocol homeopathy, and she talks a lot about how her overall health got better when she was working with a homeopath and using, one remedy at a time in its appropriate delivery.
Oh, beautiful.
So,
there it is.
But
so this conversation, I love it because for me, it's actually about a part of me which has been instilled by my parents and my culture. And that is when to DIY and when to call the electrician, right? When can I do it?
Well, you know what they
when
say.
Do I call the professional?
There are only two kinds of electricians. Good ones and dead ones.
Really?
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
So
that's the conversation that we're having.
Right.
When do I call? So imagine that, I don't know, it's a different situation. I've got a bunch of DIY projects in the basement.
Okay.
Taking up one whole corner.
Okay, wait, let's just have a conversation. How long have you been working on getting the temperature regulated in the outdoor shower? How many pieces of equipment have you purchased? You just got a delivery tonight.
Totally.
Of a new shower head.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have this beautiful outdoor shower with a tree in it. What we have a fruit tree in there now because the last tree perished.
Yeah, it's an apricot tree.
An apricot tree, that's right. But we have this beautiful outdoor shower. It's really lovely. The problem is that we got a new heater this summer, so the water is warm, but the water is not warm. It's scalding. It's 145 degrees Fahrenheit.
It's like I've got burns all over me.
Yeah.
Look at me.
That's not from the shower. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Totally.
Did you take a remedy for that?
No.
No, because you don't always need to take a remedy for everything.
No, it's just I'm going to suffer in silence.
Oh, please. Okay.
And own my scars and my wounds.
But you've been DIYing something where if you had the expertise of a plumber, we have a great plumber now who has a mermaid on his truck. Thanks, John. Anyway, and he has to fix things that our ghost does every time we have a party, which is a whole other story. But the ghost has been quiet. Usually, anyway, let's not go there. But
I've been learning.
You've been learning.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Because when I first saw my first homeopath. My first homeopath, my chronic condition in
You're
life,
sneezing.
when I was in my early 20s.
Yeah.
It's a long time ago. And, as I'm getting treatment, I'm observing. And then, of course, as I study more, then I get more confident in what I'm doing. And it's exactly the same. When you talk to someone who says your GSM is not big enough.
What does that mean?
It's a plumbing term.
Oh.
Right?
I like this.
Yeah. Then you purchase a new product. Or then you go, I feel more confident to go to the
plumbing supply.
Yeah.
Well, this is like I'm doing a sculpture class this summer.
Right.
So I've been a potter.
That starts really soon.
Yeah, a week from Wednesday.
Whoa.
But I've been working with clay for 30 years, more than 30 years. And I do sculpting in a particular way, but there's something I want to do. And I said, I don't understand the materials in this new expression of a craft that I have been working on for a really long time.
Right. Because now this is the solution that we're getting to. Yeah.
Well, I think there are a couple of other things, because I want to acknowledge that there are folks who have been disappointed by the care that they have gotten within homeopathy.
Yeah, totally.
And I'll acknowledge that I'm sure that, while I think I'm a decent homeopath, there are probably people who feel like they didn't get everything solved with me. You probably have one or two with you. And I want to acknowledge that all of us in the profession of homeopathy have people for whom we were not able to deliver care.
We all share each other's rejects. And, I saw this person, I was disappointed with the results.
It happens.
Yeah. Like
and
you got that call tonight.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I got a call just before I went to walk the dog tonight, a woman who found me online, and she was asking me, people get my cell phone number, they call. And she was asking, she said she'd been seeing a homeopath for 9 years or something, and she wanted to switch, and she saw my profile online or whatever. And I mean, I don't know. And I'm sure there are people who've been, who have seen any number of homeopaths who are looking to do it. It's totally, that's real. The thing is that if homeopathy wants to become part of the true conversation in solving medical problems, we need to be really transparent, really accountable, and really good at self-reflection in what we do. I'm getting a supervision on Monday morning because I have a case that I inherited from someone else who inherited it from someone else, and it is a person who is really sick. And Al, you and I have talked about it a million times, and I'm worried about this person. And so I want someone else. I'm going to spend my weekend putting together information about this person because they deserve the best care, right? And I'm not sure why we're stuck at the place where we are. I think I know, and I think part of the problem is that they've had a lot of homeopathic remedies in the past. And I think that we need to be really transparent about that and really think about how do we deliver the best care, right? So what can we do? So we can like when somebody says, should I see a homeopath? And they go, well, I already saw 3 homeopaths. They're really expensive. I've taken a lot of remedies and I'm not better. Then we need to reflect on why that is.
Yeah.
Right?
I agree.
And it could be, I mean, if they saw, if you see over time, people have had multiple homeopathic remedies. You don't find your soulmate and it's all over and you're healthy for the rest of your life. But overall, your well-being and vitality should improve. There is a way in, don't you think, right? And I think that the idea that everyone should have a homeopath, you and I, we talked about this earlier, but there was a time when people would say, well, your homeopath has to know. It was as if a homeopath was going to find out your deepest, darkest secrets and therefore uncover some mystery and solve all of your life's issues. I don't think it works like that. I think there has to be a level of objectivity and clinical awareness so that at every juncture, you're looking at the case, because success in homeopathy is about case management, right? I had a consultation today with someone, once again, they had this, it's a kid who has had dozens and dozens and dozens of remedies. These are the cases that I struggle with the most. And this is not just for the homeopath, if you're the student and you're thinking, oh, well, I've had, 10 remedies or 20 remedies. No, I'm talking about 100 remedies in a year, over 1,500, 2,000 doses of homeopathic remedies in a year. That we don't understand now how to work with these cases, right? The responsiveness of the vital force is changed. So, when I talked to this mom today, I said, we've got to be patient. Let's work together. Let's communicate. What is your child experiencing? Is he getting better? And we're having to look at it in this aggregate. Is the overall well-being and vitality improving? How are we seeing the case move through time? That's what having a homeopath is about, right? There is a level of expertise. A good homeopath will have a high degree of medical training. I mean, not working in a hospital and doing cadaver work, but they need to have
the basics. Anatomy, physiology, pathophysiology, plus the ability to case manage.
Absolutely.
And so those skills are not necessarily freely available in these books that we've got on the table.
Not at all. These are, everything in these books that I'm looking at, it's acute. They're acute infectious issues or injuries or, indispositions. But what it's not talking about is how do we manage the sort of chronic problems that are really degrading the well-being of people in the 21st century.
Yeah.
It's a lot. And when we've got cases of like children presenting with complex autoimmune diseases, we can't monkey around, you know? And I think we would be really well served if we acknowledge the complexity of these problems instead of saying, like, there's a certain level of ego involved in saying, I can fix it and I can do it. Like, somebody sent me a it was a post from social media, and it said, oh, well, you can't solve like a Pans and Pandas case with one remedy at a time. It would take forever. You have to give all the remedies. And I thought, oh my gosh, what are they thinking? And then it occurred to me, the philosophy that people have in their mind is one of isopathy and detoxification as opposed to what homeopathy does.
Well,
it's almost
very
like
allopathic perspective.
It's an allopathic perspective, but it's also isopathic, right? So there is this culture that has been developed that is, you have to quote unquote clear things and detoxify things. But I'm not sure that that's the answer. Maybe.
No, I'm not sure.
Right.
That's one thing that I've learned from your book, actually, that the allopaths have moved on
Totally.
from needing to identify a bug and kill it.
Yeah.
The homeopaths are still holding on to that.
They've gone backwards. The homeopaths are like back in the, and maybe it's because of cottagecore. Cottagecore, it's like...
What is that?
Cottagecore is like a lot of the dresses, like prairie-style dresses and stuff in Gingham. Remember when we were away? And that guy, there was an older gentleman staying at the inn where we were, and he was wearing a gingham shirt. And I said, oh, he's so into like the Parisian girl look of 2025. And you were like, what are you talking about? And then I showed you my Instagram feed, and you were cracking up. It was like, oh my God, there are all these gingham things. I mean, there is a way in which there's like, we want to go back to something, but but we have to see it for what it is. And I think, gosh, wouldn't it be amazing if we could pool our resources, right? Like, if we're talking about homeopathy, let's leave homeopathy for what it is. If we're talking about isopathy, just call it what it is. Like, don't call it homeopathy. Just call it isopathy. Like, find a lane and start investigating it, right? Hahnemann says in the footnote to Aphorism 56, pretty sure it's footnote to Aphorism 56, where Hahnemann says that there's allopathic medicine, there's homeopathic medicine, and then there's a third track of medicine, which is isopathy. That's the same to cure same. And he then goes on to say, and it doesn't work, and nothing but calamity will result. Okay, fair enough.
He does say that.
He does. Nothing but calamity will result. Okay, let's just say that.
Unconvincing, but yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, let's just say that homeopathy is built on that. That's the principle. That's the lane that we're staying in.
Nice.
So if there are people who are saying, I want to go isopathic and tautopathic, tautopathy being you give a preparation of a substance as if to clear it, right? So you're using sort of the principles of homeopathic pharmacy, but in a different way, right? So you're going to do a detox protocol or whatever. Yeah. That's fine. So do it, but do it. Like, figure out how does it work and what are the results. It's different than homeopathy. Like, I don't want to say don't do it. If that's your jam, go there. But that's something else, and we need research in that. We need longitudinal studies.
Love it.
To show that, right?
Yeah.
And if you're using like nosodes, so nosodes based on the biological substances. So we have information on some biological substances. Hahnemann talks about it. He says, he said nosodes, biological substance, not a bad thing. It's a different thing. And he says, yes, these medicines will bring to humanity great healing, but we need to understand them fully. So we need to understand lots of things, like what, well, I don't even want to get into it because there's so many questions, but let's get people who are really interested in it to do research and studies on it. But let's not put it in the same track as homeopathy. Let's do this together, right? Where we go, okay, this is what homeopathy, a system of medicine it's got its own philosophy, and it's got the pharmaceutical preparations, and maybe those pharmaceutical preparations used off script are going to deliver amazing results. But we got to measure it, especially if we're working with kids.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
I think that's your boundary, isn't it?
That's my my boundary is like, if you're an adult and you're making a choice, that's fine. right? We should all have agency in what we do. But if you are working with children as a practitioner, then you need to feel really confident and clear that what you're delivering in the care of that child has been fully vetted and researched. Nice. I love that. So if we do that, then we don't create dissonance in the community, right? We just say, okay, here's what I'm doing, and I'm going to test this. I'm going to test this. And then you say to people, because like if for us with the work that we do in the Institute for the Advancement of Homeopathy, anybody who is working with us, we're collecting data. We have clear communication that we are gathering information for the betterment of our profession. So they're clear about that. And we are really able to be clear that we're working with a system that has 230 years of clinical evidence. If you're working outside of that, right, because if you're working with isopathy or tautopathy, then it sits outside of the foundational principles that we know. It doesn't make it bad. It just says that, hey, let's take the time to ask the questions. And investigate.
Nice.
Especially if we're working with pediatric cases.
Yeah.
Right?
Love it.
Don't you think?
Yeah.
So maybe
it's a
this
nice
is...
point.
Yeah, I really like that.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. I believe that we are at an hour.
Oh, wait. Can I just say one more thing?
What's that?
That is because we talked about the domestic physician. Like, we talked about all these books that were around in the 19th century, but what about the ones that were most, for me, I would say precious? Miranda Castro's book.
Miranda.
So actually, this is kind of funny because I was a homeopath and I had small kids and I knew what to do, right? Like as a homeopath, and I would do for other people. But when I had to do something for my own kids, I would go to Miranda's book. I could see that cover in my, I love that book.
Mother and Baby?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I love that book.
Yeah.
Dana Ullman's books.
Yeah.
Like these were the things that we used right back before the internet. So this brings us to what we're going to do next time. So this conversation is going to go forward.
All right.
If you stayed all the way to the end, you're getting a preview of what's going to happen next week.
God bless you.
Oh my gosh. So Rachel Doherty, who is a graduate of AHE, who is amazing. And I can't wait because I just love her as a person. And she's a great homeopath and she's been working in the research office. And one of the projects that she's working on is AI in homeopathy. And she's like literally doing the hands-on work to figure out how do we sort of harness this information and how do we vet the information that we're getting. And so we're going to talk next week with her so that maybe there might be a drop in between now and then, but definitely one of the next two will be our conversation with Rachel. And I am so excited about that.
AI, the Miranda Castro of the 21st century.
You know what I think we should do this weekend? Let's call Miranda and Ellen and let's have a party conversation.
Let's have some cocktail.
Because you know what? I am the president of the Miranda Castro fan club.
Love it.
I love her. Anyway, hey, thanks for listening. I hope that this was informative and let's keep this dialogue going.
See you next time.
See ya.
See you, folks.
The Academy of Homeopathy Education provides various pathways through our program depending on your desired outcome. Our acute care homeopathy programs cater to students and medical professionals who aspire to use homeopathy in an acute care setting. We also offer introductory, professional, clinical training, and postgraduate programs. You can learn more at ahe.online.